So today we're going to talk more about personal narrative, or I'm going to talk about more about the personal narrative. So for the next couple of months, we are going to be focusing on a personal narrative, stories, and I want to start our unit by reading an example of a personal narrative. And I want you to pay attention, listen very closely. I will always look back at the night of December 19th, 2016, as the night I learned who I am meant to be. It was the night of my first piano concert. At 5:30 p.m., I stood behind the curtains with sweat beading on my forehead. I watched my friend Teo elegantly stroke the piano keys on stage, her performance coming out perfect and precise. How can this be so easy for her, I thought to myself. Peeking out into the audience, I could see my mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, and aunt all sitting in the third row. They must have read in the program that I was up next because they all sat at the edges of their seats. Grandpa had his camera in his lap, even though photography was prohibited during the performance. Teo gave a courtesy and walked off the stage, giving me a discreet high five on her way by. Just then, Mrs. Hembry, our piano teacher, announced, "Next up is one of our newest pianists, Jay Bradley. Although he has only been practicing for 3 months, I can't wait for you to hear what beautiful music he has prepared for you tonight." She peeked over at me with a look that said that I should already be on stage. Peering down at my feet, I stepped out, putting one foot in front of the other, methodically, until I reached the piano. Mrs. Hembry backed off the stage as soon as she saw that I was settled at the bench. Without looking, I placed my fingers on the keys I had memorized and let my mind take over. My fingers gently tapped the keys at first, creating a quiet tone as my song began. When I could tell that my fingers knew what they were doing, I gradually put more and more pressure on the keys, creating a deeper and louder sound from the piano. The tension on my shoulder muscles eased as I pretended that I was practicing in my living room instead of in the front of the sold-out audience. I felt the music vibrate inside my eardrums and extend throughout my body. It filled me with the happy and dramatic notes of the song I had chosen. Finally, I finished my performance. It felt like an ocean wave swept over me and released any leftover nerves or tension as I stood up and looked at the audience for the first time. My family stood tall with wide grins on their faces, clapping loudly. As I looked from left to right, I noticed that they weren't the only ones standing. About half the audience was standing, showing their respect for the performance I had given. That was the moment I knew that I was meant to be a musician. I had always had music in my heart, and on that day, I decided to always listen to it as I pursue my dreams. All right, so who was the author writing about? Himself. He used a pronoun a lot in that, over and over again in that writing. He used the word I. I is a pronoun, so that means he was talking about himself. That means it was personal. In a personal narrative, it's a fictional story, it's not a fictional story. Sorry, it's a non-fiction story. It is a true story about yourself. So, on my little chart here, it says, what is a personal narrative? Who are the main characters, and in what kind of story? So, in a personal narrative, you are the main character in a true story. You are the main character in a true story. Okay? So today, what I want you to do is I am going to assign you some task cards in the classwork section in your language arts Google Classroom. And all I want you to do is go through there and mark on them whether they are a personal narrative or they are not a personal narrative. Okay? Pretty simple. It's in Cami. You can write on the task cards and then send them back to me, and